Hello, hello. I'm trying to get everybody in here. Excellent. Hope everybody's doing well this evening. Okay. Hello there. Kenesha's waving, Regina's waving, everybody's waving. All right. Okay. Hmm. Let me share my screen and we'll get started. All right. I wanted to talk about our discussion for the week. And I read everybody's and they were all good. Um, and we know that, let me stop my share. We know that teachers teaching other teachers can take the form of whole group, small group, PLC, or one-on-one coaching. And so, was it Kanisha, did you ask me if we were going to do Hattie this semester when we drill down and start talking about curriculum? Um,
I
no,
did mention it.
but I'm not smart enough to cover stuff like that, as y'all have already figured out. We kind of go to the next level up, the supervisory level. And so here's the pop quiz for tonight. Who is it? And I know y'all know this, but be reminded of this because I read it through all of your all of them. There's a common thing. Who was it that said in order to create a culture of teaching and learning
Sorry.
and teacher leaders that there's 5 steps. The first is teach other teachers. Who said that? Teach other teachers is the first of his 5 steps. It's a he. Teach other teachers, be a part of the school improvement plan, be a part of the budget, be a part of hiring, be a part of curriculum. 5 things that who says that? But the very first step, if you want to build a culture of teaching and learning in your building, the very first step is have teachers teach other teachers. Who was it said that other than me? Somebody famous that actually knew what he was talking about. In his book, What Good Principals Do, who was that person? Todd Whitaker. If you heard of him, Whitaker. Whitaker. And so that's kind of the in terms of what Whitaker says that good principals do, he says that's number one. That's the first thing you got to do because that helps establish that culture of teaching and learning in your building. But again, now it can take any of the three, according to Darling Hammond, it can take any of the three whole group, small group, PLC, the four, or one-on-one coaching. But that has to be the first thing that you do in your building. If you want to build a culture of teaching and learning, you have to get teachers teaching others and collaborating, but more than just collaborating, teaching others. Now, here's the real question for today. I did a takeover school one time. We didn't have a lot of instructional capacity. What are you going to do now, hero? The idea of teachers teaching others is that you have instructional capacity. Some of them know something, or at least suspect it. What if you got a crowd that don't know much? What are you going to do now? That's the fallacy. There's always a downside to everything, folks, in this business. The fallacy of we're going to create a culture of teaching and learning. We're going to take the capacity we have in our building, these great teachers that we have, and teach other teachers. That assumes that you have what, Regina? Miss, Principal of the Year. What does that assume?
You have to have the capabilities. And I was in that situation coming into school where the capacity wasn't there.
There you go.
We had to find some teachers that taught the same content area, same grade levels from other schools to come in to build that bridge until we could actually hire people that had that capacity.
There you go. And that's where all of us are headed now, folks. I told you in the early 90s, I inherited a school with zero capacity. And so I partnered and got some people to come in and did an audit from some other schools. Even I was smart enough to figure that out. That I didn't have anybody because I had 37 vacancies the day that I walked in. And what I had left was not, wasn't the head of the class either. And so the question that I often ask myself is it more harmful to have to go outside and it kind of hurt their feeling, or to stick with the ones you got and let them malpractice on the others? See, that's the rock in the hard place, the devil in the deep blue sea. That's what you're called, because if you don't bring anybody in that you've already got, then they all get their tail up on their back, mad and sniffling, upset. But you can't let them, you can't, and they'll be mad at you. You can't let them. Hold 1 second. So I'm willing to take the slings and arrows for them to be mad at me rather than for them to continue to spread bad practice through the building. Now that's the part. Everybody knows that we ought to do this, but everybody don't want to go out and everybody doesn't want to commit to the blowback that you're going to get when you say, I don't have anybody. By extension, you know me, I just say it out loud. But most people would be kind enough and smart enough not to say, y'all can't teach a lick. I got to go get me somebody else. But that's what you have to do. So again, back to Whitaker. He says that's how you start a culture of teaching and learning. That's what good principals do. But in modern times, with all these residency teachers and lateral and non-licensed and bunch of kids, so young that some of them still got milk mustaches and scabs on their booster shots. If that's what your building is full of, then don't feel obligated to have them teach others. That's not a good idea. It's just not a good idea. If you have to go outside until you can build your own, now that doesn't mean we're not going to get better and try to build capacity in our own building. But if you don't have it, don't fool yourself into thinking that we'll get by. No, you won't. Nothing I know spreads worse than bad teaching. It becomes infectious. Thoughts, ideas,
Dr.
feelings.
Lamb, I know I'll present on this later on this evening, but that was reflective of Glickman with chapter 1 when he was talking about professional isolation. And so when we don't have capacity, we cannot just reside in a silo in our school. We've got to build that collaborative environment for the school. And yes,
Yep.
there was blowback, but they got over it. And 5 years later, I'm still alive.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to remember what Jerry's name was. He was at Ranson, and I brought him in and his team, and they worked with us. But the trick with that is I'm not. I don't mean to be ugly, but everybody liked Jerry, and he was known throughout the district, and everybody liked him, and that softened the blow. He had the kind of personality. Um, and now people were kind of surprised when I brought him in that he was an opposite personality type from me. But I recognized that you couldn't have two hammers. You had to have one that had that likability and softer approach. I could do the hammer part. I didn't need another hammer. And so that's part of it is you must be very intentional about who you bring in. You know, what is their style going to be? Are they going to come in and beat on them more? I mean, they're just bringing them in is a beating to start with. They don't need a second one by the attitude and actions of the people that you bring in. But you've got you this is where it starts right here, building constructional capacity. But if you don't have the people that can teach others, you've got to go outside and bring it in, as Regina said. You've exactly got to do that. Why can I not remember Jerry's last name? It's only been 35 years or 40. I can't remember. I can't remember Jerry's last name. I just loved him to death though. He was just the greatest guy. Everybody loved him. Everybody loved him, and that made all the difference in the world. That people liked and accepted him. Otherwise, but it's still not good. I mean, they're still not happy, but it helped soften the blow when we did that. So to get back to the original, yes, you want teachers teaching others only if they have the capacity to do that. You definitely don't want them teaching others if they're going to teach them bad habits. We talked about mentoring and coaching and all those kinds of things, but you can have people who teach bad habits as well. And that learning occurs as well. And you must be very intentional about who am I going to have representing me and our school to do this? Is that really who you want to be out front and center? Because those are the teacher leadership. That's the first level of teacher leadership. What you're saying is this person is an exemplar in our building. We want you to emulate them. All right. Okay, let me share my screen. I enjoyed all of your posts on those. They were well written and well thought out. I appreciate all of you on those. Very, very thoughtful. All right, so let's look at. Okay, is Sparkle supposed to present tonight? Did she trade with somebody?
Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good evening. I was talking earlier, but I believe my microphone was on a different setting. But Sparkle is on the way. She's wrapping up and coming in shortly.
All right. Very good. I didn't know if we traded or not. That gives me time. We can look at our weekly schedule. We have crossed over the divide here. We're now into March. We'll have our presentations tonight. Continue with your discussion boards. You need to be paying attention to your curriculum audit assignment, making sure that you're working on that. Um, the next time that we will be together will be in 2 weeks via Zoom. Again, the week after the spring break week, back on Tuesday night. We'll have presentations that night. And then 2 weeks after that, we'll be back on Zoom again. And then a week, normally we go 2 weeks, but because of the way the weekend worked, we'll be back a week. So we'll be on one, two, three, 4 times in a row before our last weekend in Charlotte, and then we'll have one wrap up class after that one on the 5th. And yep. That will be our schedule. And so we need to talk about the important thing is at the last weekend on Saturday, we do potluck. Um, and I had a request to do the Mexican theme again. And so if you just bring chips or if you bring something, but does that sound good to y'all? Let's see, we've had our sandwiches and we had our biscuits. So now it's time for potluck. You got to get the important stuff in life. And so I make uh taco pie. Um, and I make enough that everybody can have some. And so we'll have that. But if y'all want to bring something else, whatever Mexican theme that you want, um, that would be great. I don't think we've got any more housekeeping things. I think that's pretty much it. We'll talk about that. We got three more times, but we'll talk about that more later. All right, there's Miss Sparkle right there.
Hi, y'all.
Thank you for joining us this evening. It's good to see you.
Good to see y'all.
All right, so you have chapter 7 through 9 tonight. You're going to share your screen. I'll turn my video off and give everybody a break here.
Okay. Go up.
There we go.
This is not like, but I need to put it in present mode. This the old school PowerPoint. All right. Ready? So the first chapter that I had is directive control behaviors. This chapter focused on not all teachers are the same level of development. Some situations require clear direction, structure, and immediate action. Directive control is appropriate. This also happens when we have teacher expertise low, commitment is unclear, the student is at risk, instruction is ineffective or unsafe. Also, this chapter kind of clarifies that this is not an authoritative power sake, but it's more so improvement for leadership. There were 3 types of assistants that helped with the development supervision. And out of that, directive was the main one that they talked about in the chapter, which was teacher with low conceptual thinking, expertise, and commitment. So it was a way to bring teacher collaboration together in a way that's not so firm and nasty, but a way to see what is the real problem or issue. Some directive control behaviors occurs when the supervisor identifies the problem, determines the solution, set expectations, establish timelines, monitor the compliance, and provide consequences if it is necessary. It also talks about how the leader kind of defines the standard where they need to be, communicates clearly. And the most important thing I think that's important as leader is following through consistently is also important. This approach provides safety for children. You'll see instruction grow and urgent improvement. Some characteristics that I found from the chapter as a directive control leader uses clear, concise language, provides explicit directions, limit negotiations, set expectations, not optional expectations, monitors progress. The tone is firm. I think this is important. The tone is firm but professional. And I think Danielle could kind of relate because when I think of this person, I think of Chanel. I can't say Chanel, but I think of her of like knowing this person is a leader in our district. Her tone, she's very clear and direct and she knows what she's saying. And sometimes it comes off as aggressive because as a district, we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. But I think what she says is right. And she says the things that everybody else wants to say, especially as leaders. And she has the power to do that. She's assistant superintendent for our school. However, it does come off, but it's very professional, but it's firm to get us where we need. So I think of it as not emotional, but instruction with intent. And she's always talking about being intentional. Directive control is more effective when a teacher lacks necessary instructional skills, classroom management is chaotic or unsafe, there is a resistance to change, students are not receiving equitable instruction, And Glenman emphasized that leaders must match their supervisory behavior to teach developmental levels. This summary, chapter 7 teaches us that supervision must be differentiated. Direct control is necessary in certain contexts. Leadership requires discernment. Authority can be ethical and student-centered. And so the goal for this whole chapter that talked about is just teacher growth. It's not about being the dominant leader. It's about seeing where your teacher is and how to make them grow. As a personal reflection, I kind of just use my own leadership, what I do now as a learning coach and facilitator, thinking about the instructional gaps and where students can be harmed, behavior systems that were inconsistent, urgent, require clarity, not collaboration. And so it kind of like challenged me to ask, like, is being directive, is it because it needed or is it because it's easier? Directive control requires courage and requires clarity, and it requires alignment with student-centered values. So as a leader right now, we actually had a impact meeting from the district. And so like making sure what I was doing in my position goes in line, are they clear and concise and doing the best for what students need? I think that was an important reflection. As a leader, direct control forces leaders to examine how we use authority, how we build capacity, and how we maintain dignity with setting boundaries. I think about as this class is as I'm doing my dissertation with Black women in leadership, I was thinking about collective equity, emotional intelligence, equity, instructional equity, and Black women in educational spaces and how it looks upon. So I kind of reflected on that as well. Some key takeaways is when teachers lack skill, confident knowledge, classroom direct control is not about dominance, it's about the responsibility. So leaders must temporarily assume greater control to ensure instructional stability and student success. The mistake is not using directive control. The mistake is using the wrong teacher at the wrong time. And I think that was like a key takeaway that I took from chapter 7.
All right.
You want me to stop sharing so you
I
can
want you to stop your sharing. So we're going to take a vote right quick.
Okay.
All right. By show of hands or a thumb or whatever, how many of you think that you can both coach and evaluate teachers as a principal? Not as the instructional coach, not as the AP, as the principal of a school. Can you both coach and evaluate teachers? All right, how many say yes? Hold your hand up. How many say no? Nobody says no. I don't have not one person that's a dimwit like me. Not one. Y'all are all smart. All right. Forever, we believed in the business that principals couldn't or shouldn't coach teachers. That's just dumb. Um, and Sparkle just outlined you got to have expectations of them and behaviors. I mean, you're not trying to be their friend, but you got to know what they do and can't do, and you've got to be able to tell them, I need for you to do this or do that. And you have to speak with authority that you know what you need them to do or not to do. I did have I been with y'all since I did a faculty evaluation at Gardner Webb? I was asked to go do a psychology professor. I hadn't talked to y'all since then, haven't I? And so I went in and, you know, I watched his lesson and I saw it, mostly I saw questioning and cluing. The 9 high yield strategies, I saw that, and I pretended I might have saw a couple more. But one of the things that I talked to him about if you don't know this person, you might want to read this person and here's some things I think could help you kind of thing. I mean, I know principals can't be coaches if you're not smart enough to speak the language and know what to tell them to do. I mean, you can't just be like a basketball coach, just tell a kid get taller. I mean, he doesn't have the capacity to do that. And basically, what I see a lot of administrators doing is analogous to telling a basketball player to get taller. How? That makes no sense, or that's not realistic, or whatever. You must know the language. But I loved that what Sparkle said there is you got to be firm, but you must be intentional, have expectations, those kinds of things. I'm not telling you that you can sit in a room and coach their lesson every day. Coaching has a broader perspective than that, but it wasn't very many years ago. If I'd have asked the question I just asked, everybody on the screen would have raised their hand. No, principals can't coach teachers. They, that would have been the consensus because it was for a very long time in our business. And now, hopefully, the consensus is you better be coaching teachers. Just doing a fidelity check here to make sure that y'all know what we're supposed to be doing as adults. Remember, formative assessment or fidelity checks are not of the kids; they're of the adults. Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? And if you're a school principal, you need to be coaching students. I mean coaching teachers. Excuse me. You need to be coaching teachers. Um, I'm not telling you that's your all day full time job every day. But the overarching piece is you need to set expectations for them. So that's very good. Now, back to our earlier discussion this evening. Um, you've got to build that capacity. And that's the whole notion is you want to build it throughout your building. Um, Unfortunately, you're going to be spending most of your time at the lower end, but you can't. My point is, you can't ignore the people at the top. Your better ones, they need time and attention as well. Bishop Jake said that they need you. They need your leadership, and if they don't get you, they won't stay. So you can't ignore the good ones as well, and that's all part of the coaching. You have to coach the good ones just as well as the others, the not so good ones. But please remember that. Um, I think that's good advice for all of us. All right, back to Sparkle. That was great.
Oh, and by the way, can you send that video? That was so life-changing. I've been seeing all three of those people this week in my job, and it was so
Good.
life-changing.
Good. I'll see if I can post it in our shell. It was a Facebook link. I used to have the video, but they discontinued it on YouTube, and so I had to go. There's actually an hour and a half that's the last 30 minutes of that. If you think that's life changing, if I can post, I think if I can get both the long and the short ones, you got to watch the long one.
Okay.
Yes.
I tried to find it. I couldn't find it because I was like,
I think I've still got the links to them if they hadn't turned them off. I still got obviously I've got the short one, but
okay.
man, we used to watch those and talk all day.
Yeah, they're good. Okay, so let me go. Let's see if I can just go back to the PowerPoint. Oh, yeah. Oh, maybe not. It might not let me. Oh, there it goes. All right, so chapter 8 is directive informational behaviors. This chapter gives one of the 4 supervisory approaches in Glickman's development supervision model. So it kind of explains when leaders should take a more directive role, how to provide specific guidance without diminishing the teacher's professionalism. And this core idea is appropriate when teachers need structure, clarity, again, and explicit guidance. Particularly novice teachers are those that are struggling with implementation. So it's basically an intertwine of chapter 7. So it provides direction with explanation and rationale. So this approach assumes the supervisor has greater expertise in the specific area. So the goal is to develop, not compliance. So a lot of times as leaders, sometimes we're asking them to do something, but it's not for us. It's for not just for compliance, but you need to know the why behind why you're doing it. Some key characteristics is identifies the problem, explains why the issue matters, presents possible solutions, shares professional knowledge, action steps, specific action steps. So this is not telling teacher what to do without explanation, using authority to silence. And a lot of times, sometimes we do see this a lot. But it also is structured coaching. So like Dr. Lamb said, as a coach, as leaders, we coach instructional modeling and explicit scaffolding. So yes, they're on a plan, but you've given them 10 different action steps they're not going to be able to follow. So how can we modify that to see one growth area as we monitor it? According to Glickman, this approach is effective when teachers lack experience in a specific strategy. There's some confusion about expectations, curriculum, and sometimes I meant to add this, but not just curriculum, but your expectation of you or what you require in your building. Student data indicates urgent instructional gaps, school-wide alignment, and time constraints with clarity and precision. So as a teacher and learning coach and NTSS facilitator, This also shows up like when I'm supporting new teacher, we have a program with ARC. And so we use early implementation. Actually, we have like 10 different programs. And when we had our meeting, they're like, y'all doing too much. And we kind of like told our principal, it is a lot to monitor because we have so many resources and we don't know where to start. So like this also shows up when I'm supporting, like just to get them to focus on one thing. It's also coaching on mass spiraling before like testing, formative and informative. Our district uses already as a diagnostic, but we don't have the money and the funds to buy the program. So it's also like, how do we align? We only, for at my school, we only have it for 3, 4, and 5, but K2 doesn't have it. So they're just taking a diagnostic. They can use, the teacher can use like the teacher toolbar resources, but we can't use like the individualized assessment. So how do I help teachers and coach them through that if they're expected to use it, but we don't have all the resources to use it for? And also clarifying tier 1 expectations, what starts with the core. And for me, that's been a big thing with our teachers is the core instruction. The kids are lacking because the core is not tight. So how to do that, and by using the walkthrough tools, I'm able to help have these conversations with teachers. As a reflection, I also talked about using new curriculum framework as what I do currently, intervention alignment, expectations. What stood out to me is leadership is not about power, it's about responsibility. And that has been like a big thing for me, and clarity. When I step into classrooms, I want to make sure that I'm clarifying, have clarified expectations, and they know why I'm coming, what instructions I'm providing, and I'm coming back to follow through. So this chapter affirmed my practice, but also stretched my intentionality of how intentional am I and what am I doing. As a leader, I talked about directive information becomes powerful when it is culturally responsive, grounded in equity, and it builds teacher confidence rather than dependency and strengthen collective efficacy. I think teacher confidence is like really big because sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And if you're noticing a teacher's already shutting down, that's your place to like step away and like reflect on how you are expressing it. Because at that point, they're not listening to anything that you're saying. In schools serving historical marginalized communities, clarity matters. So students deserve aligned instruction, teachers deserve explicit support, and leaders must know when to guide and when to release. I think that's also a big, and especially for me, because I'm also a do it person. So if I've already modeled, gave it to you, you're still not doing it, I'm ready to jump in and take over. So that's something personally that I'm working on for myself. Some key takeaways. One of the powerful, I won't read all of them, but this effective supervision is not about power, it's about purposeful influence. I think we talk about a lot this in class. I really learned a lot when we talk about influence. How are we being impactful? And I think this chapter talks about that as you are directive and giving support. And as a leader, what structures are you putting in place and do they trust you? Because the ultimate goal is for the teacher growth and student achievement. So how well do they trust you? I'm going to stop sharing.
Excellent. All right. So here's the question. You have a PTO at your school and they're out raising money. Are you responsible for that? In any way? I have students all the time when I teach law or I teach finance, 740 class that hopefully you'll have somebody else for. When I teach that all the time, and they say, well, we don't have to worry about school fundraising because we turn it over to our PTA. Now, I'm trying to amplify Sparkle's point. You can delegate activity as the leader, but you can never delegate responsibility. Let me say that again. You can delegate activity. You cannot delegate responsibility. And I use the fundraising is that's law. And if they steal the money or you don't account or debit the money, they will fire you for failure to maintain fiscal control. That's the one that's just cut and dried. But you need to start with that and understand that that's the whole job is that way. Not just that financial piece. Every part of the principal's job at the principal level is it's your responsibility. You can't delegate responsibility, only activity. You got to understand that. Every outcome belongs to you. What is it your job? Make a good number go up or a bad number go down. That's it. Every outcome, everything, you are responsible for all outcomes, period. You cannot delegate them to someone else. Not the way it works. You got to understand that. Now, one thing Sparkle talked about there was state testing requirements. What grades in K through 8, what grades in North Carolina have a state EOG?
3-8.
Starting in third grade, then what? Fifth? Do you have a sixth grade? And then an eighth, right? So what are you skipping? 4 and what? 7? Not skipping 4 and 7? What's going on in 7th?
In 7, they still have reading and math, but they don't have science.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, are you talking about state tests?
Yes.
Dr. Lamb?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. EOG.
Oh, in the grade. Okay.
End of grade.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any courses that you don't have end of grade of some sort?
That would be what, science and social studies?
Yes. Except for 5th and 8th, we do test science.
Exactly,
Right.
yes.
But every grade level now, 3rd, 4th, 6th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, everyone has a state test at the end, right? So it ought to be understood that that matters. We made a mistake early on in accountability. I say we, it was the eggheads in charge, not me. But I made the same mistake. But see that because of their mistake, I made a mistake. We didn't used to have any kind of a test, state test in the 7th grade except a writing test. We had the 7th grade writing test. Yes, I'm that old. We had the 7th grade writing test, and I was principal when we had it. And so I hired this fellow named Mr. Johnny because he was supposed to get good writing scores. But what did Mr. Johnny do all year long in 7th grade social studies and language arts? He taught writing all year long. They did real well. Except the problem was when they got to 8th grade, they couldn't read a lick. I mean, that's absolutely a true story on me. I hired a guy. I'm not making this up because I just understood that he just was really good at his job, and in that 6-week unit where they did writing, that he did a really good job. I didn't realize that he did 36 weeks of writing. You cannot not focus on state testing. The dumbest thing you ever hear anybody say was, "That's just teaching to the test." Well, what else would you teach to? You've always got, and I love your list there, Sparkle. You've always got to keep your eye on that state testing. Always. And not just for this year. You can't let them just go a year without instruction in the 7th thinking, well, so that we can do well on that particular test. And then when we get to the 8th, they're a year behind on everything else. You got to, it's more than just what test are we going to have? What are we doing to prepare? Are we hitting all the material? Are we robbing Peter to pay Paul? If we know we're going to have a science test or a math test or a social studies, are we cheating the kids the curriculum so that we can focus on getting a good score on that one, but then down the road when they take that test the next year, boy, we're going to get blown out of the water. It's got to be every kid every day. And we got to make sure that we got our eye on that testing, but teachers aren't manipulating. I'm going to spend more time on this. And then because my kids aren't going to be tested on that till next year, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do what they're going to be tested on this year. And that's how you get behind, and that's how you don't make growth in a building. Right there. Right there. That's how you get that not met on growth. Right there. Teachers are doing what's most relevant to them right now.
Right.
Aisha?
Yes, sir. If I may interject, so you are absolutely correct. So I'm just thinking about English 1 and English 2 on the high school level. We're talking about the collaboration between the English 1 teacher and English 2 teacher, because they have to make sure they are riding the same boat, if you will, riding the same wave. Absolutely. So that students aren't, when they get to English 2, there's no gap in learning or no gap in the curriculum. Absolutely. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah. And we call that articulation. There was a time in the bigger districts. I know we didn't ever in the smaller districts, but in the bigger districts, we used to pay teachers um, extended day to do those meetings where they would articulate, because we couldn't do it during the day, obviously. One grade level couldn't collaborate or one group with the other. But we used to pay teachers in Charlotte Meck to stay after and do that articulation to make sure that what they were going to need in the next level, we were getting in this level. We call that articulation. But yeah, we used to pay for that because we thought it was real important. And we quit paying for it, not because we didn't think it was real important, because we didn't want to afford it. We didn't want to afford it. But I'm telling you, that's the trick right there. That's how you get these big learning gaps, and all of a sudden you have a whole group of kids that don't make growth in one. And you're thinking, did they all fall and hit their head at one time? No, no. Their teacher was focusing on something else that was more immediate to her or him, or more important rather than that. And then it didn't show up that year. And then it's not my fault. They did fine for me last year. Have you heard that one? It's not my fault. They did fine for me. Well, but you didn't teach them anything that they were going to need at the next level. So sometimes, unfortunately, we got to be careful to think, well, the teacher that had them this year didn't do a good job with them. Well, maybe it was the year before when there was no emphasis on that they didn't have that this year. So did I tell you about the family from McDowell County that moved into my neighborhood in Lake Norman years ago? Now, if you know anything about McDowell County, most of them, until they get out of the county, have never even seen a person of color. And so you can imagine who this family was. And in terms of not being anywhere, not seeing anything, came to Lake Norman and they were just appalled that there were students of color in the public school. Just appalled. Okay. And so I was out mowing the grass in the front yard, and I saw the mother come running down the hill, and I was like, oh, Lord. I've got the lawnmower on, so I won't be able to hear her. But she saw my wife had come walking out to the mailbox. And she saw my wife, and she was hollering. She came down, and she said, um, I'm so excited. The youngest one won the lottery. She's going to get to come to school with y'all at the IB. And that means because the youngest one, who was going to be in sixth grade, got in, that meant the one that was in the eighth grade was going to get, the assembly deal, going to get to come too. So both my girls are going to be there next year. We said, and I heard my wife say, well, that's, they're both fine young, girls. I'm sure they'll do well at the IB. And I thought, they're dumb as fence posts. They'll never make it there. And she said, well, I'm just concerned. I'm going to talk to you about, the experience they had this year. So they went to the local charter school, um, which is code for went to the local white school because they didn't want their kids to be with children of color. And said, we're concerned how she's going to do when she comes back to the IB school because they didn't have math this year. You got my attention. I turned my lawnmower off. I got to hear this story. What do you mean both of your kids went a whole year in school and didn't have math? Well, said that they couldn't find a math teacher, so they just had music this year. I wish I was making that up. I'm not making that up. Now, that's an extreme example, but that's absolutely a true story. I've not embellished it any. I could tell you more stuff. But my point is this: what if you were the teacher in sixth grade and eighth grade math that got this kid who didn't have math the whole previous year because it wasn't convenient to that school to have math, or that wasn't convenient to that school to get a decent math teacher, or to make the one they had actually show up and work? What are you going to do? What I kept thinking about, that sixth grade and that eighth grade math teacher that got those two kids that hadn't had math since the year before that. Can we, but part of one of the gaps in our model is that we hold teachers accountable right now for what might have happened last year or the year before. The whole point of me belaboring this point here is you need to be knowing what's going on in your rooms so that that doesn't happen, because that's going to come back and get you. Yeah, you might do better on the seventh grade writing test right now, but boy, next year when they're in the eighth grade, you're going to get killed on that EOG. You're going to get killed. And if you're, and as Naisha said, if your English one teachers aren't talking to your English two to make sure that they're going to be ready what they need to have, you're going to get killed in English two. And you know that's on the state report card for high school. You better make sure. And again, now Robin Hammond would tell you those are the things you circle. Those are the important stuff. The one that's going to feed to the scores. That's the important stuff. So it's not just important that they do well in English two. It's important that they do well in English one, be prepared for English two. Because sometimes it's next year when you get the whipping. They didn't have it this year, but they don't get tested till next. But think about those two little children. It wasn't those little children's fault. Those were fine little girls. But their parents were willing to let them not have math for a whole year. And they didn't last a month at the IB school. They didn't last a month. They did not make it the first month of school. They walked in and, they were so far behind. And my argument, and my wife confirmed this, if they didn't even attempt to have math, how much emphasis you think they put on anything that they had if it was okay not to have math at all? And so that's kind of an extraneous case, but the idea is don't do it to yourself and don't do it to others. Be a professional. Make sure that you're doing what you need to do, even if the kids are going to score at the next school next year. Make sure that you're doing what your teachers are doing, what they're supposed to be doing now. You must keep your eye on those state tests. I know people think, oh, it's awful to teach. Our job, again, make a good number go up or bad number go down, as represented by that state report card. So when people talk about, that not being too intelligent and all that, guilty, but it's dumb to say we're not going to teach to the test or we're not going to understand that that's what matters. That's what you're saying. Sparkle, back to you.
And I just wanted to add to your point, K2 matters. And I think the
Yes.
problem is like I'm telling y'all yesterday, I was so embarrassed. But thank God that she has coaches that we know because the district seen who is running her school. But our numbers are so low. So first of all, we were projected to do 80% every time. Well, when she presented the data yesterday to the district, you can't lie to them. We were in the 60s. So we all looking like, where are these numbers coming from? Like, that's not like what we've been doing. And I've been trying to wrap K2 teachers to get them to understand you matter, because what's happening is that when they're going to third grade, they don't have the coding skills. So those
Right.
teachers in
Right.
fourth and fifth, they don't have time to teach the coding skills. So they're
Exactly.
alone.
That's how you get not met. It spirals. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. You get whole classrooms or whole grade levels. That's how that not met spirals. And that's how you have to look for other work as the leader of that bunch.
Yeah.
And so, that blade swings both ways on growth. Yeah, that's how you can make a bonus as a principal. It's also how you lose your job as a principal. That blade swings both ways. But to your point, two things have to be done with K2, in my opinion. You matter. Obviously, you're foundational. You're more important than even the tested grades in terms of being foundational. That's number one. But number two, I'm really concerned about grade inflation because the kids don't really take the test in K2. The teachers do the test, or they it's their opinion of what the kid can do, and they always overestimate because they're overestimating their ability to teach. Oh, I know I taught them that. I know they got that. I know I covered that. I know. But the kid really demonstrate that. Making sure that they're honest in their assessment of not only the child but their own ability of both. I've told you before, and I'll say it again. Lowe's and Home Depot make billions of dollars a year based on people overestimate their ability. That they think they can watch a YouTube video on laying tile and do their bathroom and make a big mess and spend all that money at Lowe's and Home Depot and then have to pay somebody to come and do it right. It's human nature to overestimate your ability. So, you know, you've got to be real that yes, you got to convince K2 that they're the most important people in the building, but the extension of that, they've got to be honest, they've got to be professional, and they've got to be realistic. That part of that professionalism is just because you think you taught that doesn't mean if the kid can't demonstrate it, you didn't teach it. You might have covered the material. And I think that's the part with K2 teachers to get them to understand the difference between covering the material and teaching. If the kid can't demonstrate it, you haven't taught it. Let me say that again. If the kid can't demonstrate it, you have not taught it. If you can get your K2s to understand that, that's half the battle. Your teachers. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
You
Thank
can
you.
do that. But yeah, you're exactly right. You got to convince them that, and they are the most important people in your building. They are foundational. But how many of us hire elementary teachers that can't teach a lick, lucky to find the room? Just hope they show up every day sober and clean clothes and don't wet their pants before the day's out. And what do we do with them? We stick them in K2. Well, how smart is that? We're taking them and we're putting them in the most foundational place. That's not smart. But instead of having critical conversations and trying to improve them, we just stick them down in the grades that don't count. That's not smart at all. We just do dumb stuff. We are not a smart bunch as a collective. See, this is why the curriculum people talk trash about us all the time, because we do dumb stuff like this. But we have to wear it. We have to earn it. We've earned it. We have to wear it because we do dumb things like this. We take the worst teachers in our building and put them in the most foundational, important courses. But tell me I'm not telling the truth here. Yeah, that's what we do. Boy. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna take us
The
home.
harassment we get from the curriculum ladies.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna take us on home with
Take us on home,
collaboration.
Sparkle.
All right. So chapter 9 is collaborative behaviors. So this chapter focuses on the importance of collaboration and instructional supervision, communication skills that are effective for supervision, building trust, and collective responsibility. The core idea I got from this was effective instructional leadership requires intentional collaborative behaviors that empower teachers and build collective efficacy. Glickman describes collaborative behaviors as joint problem solving, shared responsibility for instructional improvement, active listening, mutual respect. So collaboration is not just passive agreement, it's structured. And it talks about, he also talked about like the characteristics of the teacher and how like the personality profile. So I don't know if y'all probably did this with your teachers, but like knowing how to talk to your teachers, you know how we had to do like the personality trait. Some people do like the colors. I've seen schools do where they did like the color test. So if they're blue, if they know that you're like sensitive, how do you approach to talk to them versus the green is someone that you can be very direct and they'll get it done. So like kind of knowing, it talks about that in the teaching styles and attitudes towards, Glickman talked about a lot of that too with collaboration. Also, behavior shift supervision from evaluation to partnership. So I think that's when the coaching part would come in. It's not more of I'm evaluating you, but I'm in this with you to support you through it. Why collaborative behaviors matter. As a leader, we must diagnose before we prescribe. So then we need to build trust, increase efficacy, strengthen professional culture, promote teacher retention. I think Regina also hit on this too, of like, even how we dress as professional, like seeing like this is just a different generation. Especially I noticed when I taught and coached in middle school and the high school level of what they were wearing was very like inappropriate. So having those conversation of what professional dress looks like. I know at my school it's kind of like dressed down. A lot of people wear like jogging pants and sweatpants. And I'm just like, as a professional, like what they see and what you get. So like having those conversations That goes back to trust, and reflective practices as well. Example in the practices is so co-creating SMART goals, data conversations and PLCs, joint lesson planning, reflective post-observation conferences. I know this is important, especially with my teachers, is they get their observation, but that's it. Like there's no pre, there's no post. It's just like that is. And then the email is just come to me if you have questions. But I think it's important that you reflect and understand so they know. I've always learned when I first started teaching to have an artifact binder. So I was able to like stand like when I got something that may have been accomplished, I was able to show what standard it was and the artifacts and the data to prove it. So teaching teachers, I think that's important, how to stand up for themselves and advocate for themselves. Inquiry-based coaching cycles. Collaboration requires structure, not just intention. So there are also barriers to this. So he talks about the lack of trust, the fear of vulnerability, time constraints, power dynamics, using your position as a leader to frighten someone, misalignment of expectations, and true collaboration require psychological safety. So not everybody, right? So you have to be trusting, and it's important. Like this chapter was like really hitting home too of like what is our intention behind collaborative, because also sometimes like boy, I've been seeing some comrades. I'm just telling you, that's changed my life. And it's just been eye-opening for me as a leader too, of like thinking we collaborating, but it's only just to get someone else. Teachers know, and they start to notice that. And I think that's important too when you are looking into collaboration. So personal reflection. So things that I've learned is teacher responds to partnership more than compliance. So they want to know that you really genuinely care. Listening builds more change than telling. Having those conversations about data must feel supported. Coaching requires emotional intelligence and knowing where they are. So my work with PLCs, and as I pull groups in tier 3, I also don't just collaborate with the teachers. I'm also collaborating with parents, and I'm also modeling, because I know right now my expectation is to pull groups and teachers expect me to do it, but you need to know like these are your babies and this is your home and you don't want nobody coming to your home. So when you get that idea of like, I want to do more, I have seen teachers take more initiative and wanted to do better within their classroom. So it also comes with, again, knowing where they are and that emotional intelligence. As a leader, do I dominate conversation or facilitate them? These are some things I kind of reflected from the chapter. Do teachers feel ownership of decisions? Am I diagnosing teachers' readiness before selecting a supervisory approach? Do I create a space for honest dialogue? I think that's important. And one of the things I highlighted is collaborative leadership reflects transformational and distribution leadership models. Some key takeaways: collaboration must be intentional. Supervisory styles must match teacher readiness. Listening is a leadership skill. Trust is foundational. And one of the things that I highlighted was chapter 9 reminds us that supervision done with teachers is more powerful than supervision done to teachers. That was one of my takeaways from this chapter.
I like that. I like that a lot. This is kind of an aside here. I'm concerned too that dress reflects attitude as well, Sparkle. I've always believed that. My father told me, I remember when I was just, young, getting to be an adult. He said, you don't see too many men in a suit of clothes locked up in the county jail. He said that your dress many times will impact your beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. Um, maybe I disremember, but I don't believe I've ever been in a public school as an adult employee that I didn't have a necktie on. I wore a lab coat and a tie when I taught school. When I became high school principal in Charlotte, the moratorium was no jeans, no tennis shoes. I want a collar on your shirt every day. And you'd have thought I asked them to give blood. But we're not going we're going to try to look, we're going, even if we aren't, we're going to try to look professional. I think that's a big part of it, is it fits the attitudes. All right, I've got one more thing tonight. Sparkle, you did a great job. That was really, really good. Well planned and thought out and prepared. I like that you were Any level, teacher through administrator, you're always supposed to reflect on your practice. I like that you reflected on each of these, what your takeaways were. That's excellent. So let me share this right quick, if I can, as we go out, and you can see how few skills I have. I always use myself as the bad example here. All right. I did his evaluation the other day. How many, here's what I saw and I wrote it up and I cited the references and did all that. How many things did I leave him to work on? Now, he's a veteran teacher, but in terms of teaching ability and nomenclature and knowledge of the actual business, he's very much a neophyte, but he wants to get better. And so what did I start with him to work on? Something foundational. All right. Have students create their own similarities and differences. That's Marzano. To assess their level of understanding, he needs to work on that. Similarities and differences, because that's the easiest one to start with. I think that's the easiest of the 9 strategies. Um, And this requires students to start with something they know, build on the knowledge. You could do that. But I also gave him a reference there that he should start learning about that himself. But where did I start him? This is, he's been teaching a long time and he finally says, I want to get better at this. So what did I start him out on? The simplest of the 9 strategies, similarities and difference. I did not start him out on non-linguistic representation. I'm not even sure I know that one myself after 45 years. My point is know your audience. Know your audience. And if you have to start them at the foundational level, which you do with a lot of BTs, but especially these residency teachers, you're going to have to start them at the foundational level. And you got to you still got to have expectations of them. You still got to be intentional. But if they're at the neophyte level, you got to start and build them. You got to scaffold them, as Vygotsky would say. So I'd like for, Dr. Jim Morgan, who is a fine man, a fine, better person than me, but he needs to start with Marzano and he needs to understand the theory behind it, which is adult learning theory. But he needs to understand if you want to be a better teacher, you got to be a practitioner of the 9 skills that make you a better teacher. The high yield strategies. You got to start with the easiest one. And so, my close for you tonight is you have to be a coach as a principal, as a leader. That's not true. That whole idea that you can't coach them and evaluate them. You got to. You have to have high expectations for them. You must collaborate, those kinds of things. But in my opinion, the most important is you teach the students you have, not the ones you want. Let me say that again. You teach the students you have, not the ones you want. If they're at that neophyte level, I know they're supposed to have been trained and taken to praxis and all that stuff. Yeah, but my hair wasn't supposed to fall out. See how that worked out? Well, that I was supposed to have this group that did X, Y, and Z. You take them where you find them. You teach the ones you have. If you have to start, it didn't matter that Jim Morgan's been teaching for 40 years. He's a neophyte on how to teach. You can't just look at somebody and say, well, that old man, he ought to know all this stuff. We're going to hold him at this level. No, this is the first time in his career he ever said, I think I'd like to learn how to teach. The actual real way, the professional way that has theory behind it and specific activities. I'd like to learn that. He said, it's what he came to me and said, I'd like to learn that. We start them at their level. We start them at their level. And we have expectations, but we have to start them there. And if you can do that, you can connect with people. You can connect with them if they see that you're willing to work at where they are instead of you should have. How many times you heard teachers say, "You all should have known that. We've already covered that. You should know that. What's wrong with you?" That's the same with us working with teachers. We have to take them where we find them. All right. We have anything for the good of the group? I
Well,
talked
Dr.
too much
Lamb,
and we ran 6 minutes over, but that's okay. Yes.
I know as I was listening to Sparkles, I know they're not sequential in the book, the Glickman book itself, but like I have chapters 1 and 2, and they really tie in what Sparkle's saying. If you don't mind, I don't mind tonight, if y'all are good with it, to knock it out in about 10 minutes.
Go. I'm good. I set aside 2 hours for these.
Okay. All right. Because one thing what Sparkle was talking about was how we're coaching the teachers before we begin to coach them as we're hiring. And I know about our district right now, we're about to begin hiring season. And so we're going to really look at what we're going to do when we're hiring these folks, when we're bringing them into our buildings. So first things first, before we go any further, can y'all see that first slide?
No, it went out.
Okay.
I didn't turn my video off and it flickered and it came on for a second and went right back out. I've turned my video
I'll bring
off
it
now
back
and see
in
if
there.
it'll let you in now. Yeah.
All right. Are you able to see it now?
Yes, now we got it. I was a little
we're
slow
cooking
on the
with oil.
camera there.
All righty. So when we're talking about this first leg here with Glickman, and we're trying to progress through this, and looks like it's disappearing from y'all's screen there. Let's see here. All right. So when we're going through these first couple chapters here for 1 and 2, we've got to create a building where teachers are collaborating, because like Sparkle's right now doing 2 and 3 jobs at her school. She can't do it all by herself. She's got to have support in the building. It has to be in place. And so chapter 1 starts off talking about the different kind of schools that we need with supervision to be successful. And so out of all 4, we've had kind of schools where you have people who are all buddy, but when it comes to talk about content, they go to their separate corners. It's completely isolated. Then you have some schools that they're depending on the principal, the coach, the hierarchy to be the one that tell them what to do. They're very dependent. But again, still, no collaboration is taking place. We're just waiting to be given instructions. What we're going for is to try to get more of a collegial supervisory school where you have purpose and you're bringing together adults purposefully. We can't just say, meet with your colleagues. We've got to set up a PLC schedule with expectations. What are our school goals? Because if we don't have that, then we're not going to have that perfect collaboration between our teachers. And as you're going to see in chapter 2, that's where we're going to start losing folks. So we've got to make sure we have goals, but be very purposeful when you bring your folks together. We often give people titles in our buildings. We know you're on the SIT team, you're a department chair, you're a correlate chair, but do we tell them what roles they really have? Are we defining those roles as instructional leaders in our school? So we've got to make sure you don't just give someone a title, but you've got to help them to understand what that title entails, what their roles are, and they may need professional development on that, whether formally or informally. So we got to go ahead on and make sure that we're giving them what they need so then they can lead their colleagues, because if not, that whole structure of teacher leader is going to fail. But one thing to you all, I think we've all been guilty of at some point, is overloading a handful of teachers with all the duties and not giving them something in return. We have to make sure we give them some time to prepare. So if I'm going to have an 8th grade math teacher to help coach a 6th grade math teacher, then I got to make sure she's not going to have ball game duty this 9 weeks, because she's going to have some time to prep for this. And I have to keep checking in with that teacher to find out what else do you need from me as a leader to help you with your new job in the building. And all of us adults, we like reward. I don't care what anyone says. Yes, we have intrinsic motivation, but we like to be rewarded. So what can we do for these folks when they are teacher leaders in our buildings? Glickman talked a lot about what characteristics must a teacher leader possess. Everyone in your school can't be a teacher leader. That's just that. It's not about saying you've been there 10 or 20 years. You need to have true knowledge of your content, of the area we're having you to coach. You have to have some interpersonal skills. I have a teacher right now, dynamic math teacher, but I can't make her a teacher leader to help other teachers because she believes in isolationism. Now, side note, she'll be moving on to a different location next year, but you got to have those interpersonal skills in order to be a teacher leader. And of course, those technical skills, like looking at that data and making some magic with it. Chapter 2 really focuses on what happens when we don't create the environment from chapter 1. What can go wrong? One thing that tends to happen is Dr. Lamb, you referenced it earlier. We are hiring people, residency. I often say we hire people now from the carpool lane.
Yeah.
And then we give them a set of
I
keys.
told
we
you
give
I
them
was
these
out flagging
children
cars down on Central Avenue. Can you teach school when I had 37 babies?
teach. If they have a pulse and they come in the interview sober at this point, they just might get a job. That's just where we are. That's it. And so the thing is, how are we helping our beginning teachers? My sister-in-law, this is her first year teaching after a long career in the military. Well, y'all, it's her first year, and guess what? She barely made it to Christmas. We had to like pray her through to get her to the end of the year. So right now she's counting down to June. There was not adequate induction in that school. You've got to make sure that we're preparing our new folks and supporting them throughout, not just saying, hey, good luck, call me if you need me. Well, are we there in the trenches?
I think you just hit the nail on the head with a lot of these residency teachers. They're not 22 years old, and we think because they're 42 or 52 or like Jim Morgan 62, we look at them and we say they should be at this level. No, they're a 22-year-old in a 42-year-old's body, and you got to understand that. That's a great point about your sister-in-law.
Yes. Again, so one thing she said, and we talked about this quite a bit as a family of educators, is resources. She wasn't given the instructional tools that her colleagues were given in their ROTC department. And then even the work assignments, it was smoke and mirrors. Okay. What am I supposed to be doing? What are the deadlines? Those things were very unclear. So she relied on family members like us in the business to try to help her make sense of what she should be doing as a teacher in her building, even a unique role at a high school. But in reality, that reality shock that's listed here, it kicked in pretty quickly. By about Labor Day, she was questioning her thoughts and her choice in being a teacher. And so we really had to try to help to coach her through from 2 states away. But she's symptomatic of a lot of our beginning teachers. If we don't have proper induction, we're going to have folks that are leaving our buildings, and we can't put them with people like from chapter 1 who lack interpersonal skills because their teammates won't help them if they don't know how to truly be a teacher, leader, or a coach.
Yeah.
Some things that we said we're trying to deal with, though, is in our schools, and sometimes it happens by nature of how big your school is. Teachers can feel isolated. If you're not a math teacher, then, well, maybe I don't know who you are. Or if you're not my grade level, I don't know who you are. Or I'm a beginning teacher. You've been around 25 years. We wouldn't even talk. So we've got to make sure that we're, I hate to say forcing, but creating an environment where people are covering with folks who are not on their grade level, not in their department, not a similar experience. It may sound petty or trivial, but oftentimes for faculty meetings, I still use name tents and I mix them up because we're not going to keep sitting by the same 3 people for our whole career. Because it's just like high school in cafeteria, someone doesn't have anyone to sit beside. So we've got to make sure that we are creating those environments for them to be together more often. So to briefly hit in with Newtonian paradigm, what we're seeing is in schools, when something is not working, instead of being reflective to say, what was my role in it not working, we're looking in essence for a scapegoat. So if those English 1 scores or English 2 scores are not good, Naisha's being reflective about that versus saying, oh, it must just be this teacher. Because under atomism, all we're saying is, oh, we have a broken part. If you get rid of that part, everything's going to run smoothly. But we can keep getting rid of teachers or moving teachers around. If we don't see what in our building and our school culture is the root cause, we're going to continue to have the same problems over and over again. So we cannot leave schools with an atomism mentality of just, oh, this doesn't work out with this teacher, I'm going to get rid of them and then we'll get someone else, because we're never going to really get to the root of what we need to do. Going back to the induction, we spoke about that. We have to make sure that our schools have dialogue. Sometimes people walk around our buildings in the daytime and really don't talk to anyone. And that's whether it means saying hi or bye, or even just talking about what we're doing in the school. Do they understand their goals? So we've got to make sure there's constant dialogue in our buildings. We have to create those dynamics and to make sure that teachers feel heard, whether they are a first-year teacher or a 30-year teacher. Are we giving them opportunities to give input in decision-making processes? Because if they don't have the ownership in the process, then you're not going to have true buy-in. You're going to see your processes carry out. And so some closing thoughts is, like we heard from Spark already tonight and Dr. Lamb, we've got to be very purposeful at this point in education, because if not, we're not going to have anyone in front of our students, because education programs are not longer, a lot of universities do not have a true education department anymore, where folks are going to school to be teachers. So we're going to continue to hire from Walgreens and the carpool line, But if we don't create these strong foundations of culture in our buildings, we're going to keep having to replace people year after year. And that's really what chapter 1 and 2 hit on, in correlation with chapter 7, 8, and 9, on how are we going to get the folks in the building, how are we going to coach them, and how are we going to keep them.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about the years that we were just eating our young, losing 20% of them in the first 4 years, 80%. We were in stress, but we weren't in crisis. Now we're not only losing them, we're losing mid-career people as well. And that's because we aren't doing our jobs in our building. We are not intentional with them. Just like your sister-in-law, we see a 40-year-old person, they can handle their business. We got other fish to, but you got to teach them where they are, not the ones you want, but the ones you got. And you know, and it was never more true than what we used to say back in the day. If they've got the sniffles by hog killing weather, and for those of you not from Eastern North Carolina, that would be Halloween. If they've got the sniffles by Halloween, they won't last. They'll be gone at the end of the year. If they're crying by Halloween, they'll be gone at Christmas. You better know that. You better be monitoring them. But it's not just monitoring them. How are they doing? Well, it looks okay. I'm talking about that intentional professional development and collaboration and coaching and mentoring that needs to happen. And it can't just be based on time. It has to be based on talent and where they are. It's another one of those things that we can't base it on time. Because if we get a lot of mid-career people now, and the assumption is if we get mid-career people, they'll know what to do. Jim Morgan is as fine a man as I know, and he's not mid-career. He's like me. He's late career, but he's a beginner when it comes to wanting to learn about the actual skills of teaching. And so you have to treat him as if he were a first-year teacher. That I don't mean disrespectfully, but you have to scaffold him, and you're going to have to scaffold your mid-career people that are just joining you new. But Regina's exactly right. We're literally going to be out waving down cars. Can you teach school? If we don't do better. And again, don't blame everything else. What are you doing or not doing to make sure that you don't just have constant turnover, a revolving door in your building? I think that's great. Excellent job, Regina. Well, I tell you what, if y'all had a better instructor, y'all would be really good. y'all are better students than I am teacher. I'm very impressed. All right.
Dr. Lamb, I want to thank you before we hang up, though. I want to thank you. You presented on master scheduling when we were together in Charlotte. And I used your slides the other day by faculty meeting because I was tired of people thinking that we're doing a master schedule based on opinions and feelings.
Yeah.
And so when they saw that, they realized that what I've been telling them the whole time, I didn't make up, that this is actually proven and everything. So there are folks who were like, oh, there's a lot less questions in this meeting than last year's meeting. They said because she put that slide up there and said, look, here's a career educated professor who's done all these things and said, this is how we should be doing master scheduling. And that meeting ended so much easier than the previous ones.
Great. Yes. I mean, there's a method to this madness. There's a way to do this, to do these things. And it's not, we just eeny, meeny, miny, mode this. School administrators have skills. They're professionals. And what was it? If Dr. Bishop Jake said, if they don't know who they got, they can mess around and lose it. They need to know who you are and that you know this stuff, and that you didn't just make it up. You're a professional, and that a lot of research and experience has gone into this. They need to understand these things. We just didn't make this up. I appreciate that. That's very good to hear. But yeah, you need to, the lessons that you're learning, hopefully you're taking back and instituting in your building that, look, this is how it really works. And at the end of the day, we're accountable for this. We're responsible for outcomes. We have to be committed, not just involved. We've got to move these numbers. That's our job every day. and we're going to be here to support and help you. But there's a method to this. This is how we're going to do things. And as long as everybody knows this is how we do things, and you ought not get your feelings hurt. That don't mean that they won't, but you know, you know me, I tell everything I know up front. If I know it, you'll know it. No secrets. That's part of that collaboration. There's no secrets. I think that may be the most important part of collaboration. There's no secrets. We're not holding stuff back. And then we can truly be partners and collaborate if we do that. And that's what you're looking for, is a partnership. That's where we're headed. Well, I'll see you again in 2 weeks. I appreciate all that you've done. Keep up with your work. More importantly, keep up with that dissertation class. Don't get behind over there, because I can't pull you out of that fire. I'll try, but I may not be able to get you out of that one. So don't get in that swamp. The best way not to get out of a swamp is don't get in it. So don't get in that swamp getting behind in that dissertation class. They don't have any sense of humor over there on the curriculum side. You know that. All right. It's good to see everybody tonight. Thank you for being with me. I enjoyed it. I love seeing you every week. Give yourself a hand. You did a great job tonight. Again, congratulations to Regina and Sparkle. Wonderful presentations tonight. I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye, y'all.
Thank
Good
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Good night.
night.
Good night.